it's our great fortune to be able to hear from His Grace Shivananda Prabhu. I'm just reading a small snippet from Prabhupada Leelamrita, Volume 4, Chapter 2, London, a Dream Fulfilled. As an introduction to Prabhuji, a devotee could go many places and accomplish many things, Prabhupada said, but unless he was free of material motives, he would not be able to implant the seed of bhakti into the hearts of others. Prabhupada cited Shivananda, who had gone alone to Hamburg and tried his best with faith in his spiritual master. Now, Krishna was blessing Shivananda with a little success, a storefront temple, newly recruited devotees, an interested professor, and other guests coming and chanting. Even one lone preacher could accomplish many things for Krishna, provided the preacher was free from sense gratification and a desire for profit, adoration, and distinction. So, Srila Prabhupada is referring to Shivananda Prabhu. Shivananda Prabhu was initiated in the early days of the movement, around 1967 or 68. And before the three couples, the famous couples that went to London, Srila Prabhupada requested Shivananda Prabhu to go to London. He went to London, but since due to his visa problems, he couldn't enter. So he went to Hamburg, and he started the movement all alone. And Srila Prabhupada visited Hamburg before he visited London. He stayed with Shivananda Prabhu for 3 weeks, and we have heard many beautiful, intimate pastimes, Prabhuji, previously in these classes. After Srila Prabhupada went to London, this is what he had to say to the devotees of London who are still struggling to make a place. He gave an example of Shivananda Prabhu. Shivananda Prabhu and Madan Mohan Mohini Mataji has been serving the movement for very, very long time. They were in Boston also serving the deities Radha Gopi Vallabha. I know very little about them, but I know we are very fortunate to have them on the call today to hear from such an exalted devotee who was glorified by Srila Prabhupada himself. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for giving us your valuable association. Please take over the call.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just to clarify things a little bit, also, when I was in Montreal, I approached Srila Prabhupada because I had gone on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada, and I had mentioned different places that I'd gone to in Europe before I was a devotee. And then Prabhupada said, oh, well, you should go to all those places and open temples. Mm-hmm. So then I had heard that Srila Prabhupada wanted to start a temple in London. And I was young man, so I had some wanderlust. I wanted to get out and do things. And I was, at that time, I was kind of like restricted in Montreal, so I thought, well, this would be a nice adventure. So I actually went to Srila Prabhupada, and I suggested that, I heard you wanted to open a temple in London. Should I go? And Prabhupada said, at first, Prabhupada said, no, stay here in this temple and develop this center. And so then, still I was a little frustrated. So then I approached Srila Prabhupada again, and then he said, okay, well, you can go. And what happened was that my mother gave me some money at that time, previous to my going to Europe. I had gone to Europe before when I was a non-devotee. I hadn't become a devotee yet. And I had tried to get into England twice, and I was coming first as a draft dodger during the time of the war in Vietnam. And then the second time I was coming up from Morocco, and they thought, oh, he's bringing some drugs in. So I didn't have any drugs. But anyway, they refused me entry. At that time, it wasn't so easy to get into England. So then, third time, then I came to London, and I has, my shaved head, Sika, beads on my neck, and I had Lord Jagannath and Balaram and Subhadra in my suitcase. And so they thought, oh my goodness, here he comes for the third time. So they said, no, you can't come into England. And recently, at that particular time, a very prominent not astrologer, but there's another movement, and he'd been expelled from England. So they decided that they weren't going to let me come into England. So then from there, I went to Amsterdam, and I preached in Amsterdam for some time, and then a friend of mine who I made, a friend in Amsterdam, told me that, people here in Amsterdam are very poor. If you go sit on the street and chant with a begging bowl, it will be a little bit difficult for you to support a temple here. And so I said, okay. So there was a newspaper article from a Dutch paper, and I explained about the Krishna conscious movement, and they printed it in Dutch, and then I sent an excerpt of that article to Srila Prabhupada. And of course, Srila Prabhupada couldn't understand the Dutch, but he said, I see that my name is mentioned quite a few times in the course of the article. So he said, so this indicates that your tour of Europe will be successful. So then I thought, well, if Amsterdam's not going to be much good for making a temple, then maybe I should go to Berlin, because Berlin was like, big name, big city. So I went on to Berlin, and then I tried to get something going there. And then I was thinking that, well, maybe I should go to Switzerland, because in Europe, the Swiss, everything is done very expertly by the Swiss people. And so then I mentioned this in a letter to Srila Prabhupada, and then Srila Prabhupada said, no, I want you to stop. I want you to open a temple in Berlin and do that. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll open a temple. And in those days, opening a temple means getting a storefront. So anyway, I got a storefront in one particular place in Berlin, and opened up the temple, and then Srila Prabhupada was very happy with that. And then two devotees from San Francisco came to help out, Krishna Das and Uttama Shloka. Uttama Shloka was actually a German person, and so he could translate some different things. So they came to Berlin, and then they saw the situation in Berlin, and then they thought, well, see, at that time, Berlin was kind of like an island in the middle of the communist section. After the Second World War, the Allies devised the idea. See, Germany had risen once for World War I, and then risen again for the Second World War. So the Allies had a plan that we will divide Germany into 4 parts and Berlin into 4 parts. And the prevailing political philosophy, I think at that time, was that whoever holds Berlin holds Germany, and whoever holds Germany holds Europe, because Germany is so centrally located in Europe. So the Allies, at the end of World War II, divided Germany into 4 parts, a Russian section, French, English, and American section. So, and then they divided Berlin like that, and they also divided Germany like that. And so the Berlin was in the Russian section. So Berlin was kind of like an island at the time. And it was all communist DDR, which is the Deutsche Demokratische Republik, which is the communist section. And so it was kind of like an island. And we thought, or they thought, Krishna Das and Uttama Shloka thought, maybe it's better to go to Hamburg, because there are more young people there in Hamburg than in Berlin. People, so some tourists would come to Berlin and see different things, but there weren't very many young people. So we then closed up things in Berlin, and we went to Hamburg, and then eventually we got a temple there. and a storefront once again on Eppendorfer Weg. And then we started our activities there. And Srila Prabhupada, on his way, then the three couples from San Francisco came to London, and they were able to get in. And then they started cultivating the Beatles and John Lennon and George Harrison. And then they got facility from John Lennon's estate. John Lennon opened up his estate to the devotees, and so then the devotees could invite Srila Prabhupada to come there. So first, when Srila Prabhupada came to Europe, he came to Hamburg, and then he stayed for 3 weeks there, and then at that particular time, I was able to take Srila Prabhupada on his morning walk every day, cook his lunch for him, and also give him massage every day. So that was very nice, close, intimate service with Srila Prabhupada. So that was very memorable. And so then Srila Prabhupada went on to London to stay at John Lennon's estate, and then they began their preaching and getting things going in London, and they found Bury Place, and so they got things. So then things started developing there, getting going in London. And of course, the preaching in London was really nice because of the Beatles, and the Beatles. While Srila Prabhupada was in Hamburg, the Hare Krishna mantra was released by George Harrison, by Apple Records, and then Prabhupada got a recording of that, and he would play it, and then it became quite popular. So they were doing a very nice job of preaching in London there, and Srila Prabhupada was there directing things and telling what to do, and then they got the deities, London Ishwara, and boy, they did very nicely. So anyway, that's how things were going on in there. So I just want to give a little historical account of how that was going on, and of course at that time of the movement in the movement, there were not very many devotees. So, Srila Prabhupada singled me out and mentioned that. And later on, more purer devotees came to the movement. So at that time, there weren't very many devotees. But anyway, we were preaching in Germany, and we were preaching in London, and then eventually Paris came along, and there was a lot of nice preaching. So I just want to explain about that. And so now I'll start the Bhagavatam class, unless somebody has some historical questions about that. Okay. So I was asked to speak on Canto 3, Chapter 32. The Canto 3 is called the Status Quo. Chapter 32 is the Entanglement in Fruitive Activities, and this is text number 8. And I'll chant the prayers that I usually chant before I give Srimad Bhagavatam class, which is Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat. Before uttering this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we offer our respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. And I also offer my very humble and very respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who has very kindly translated and commented upon this Srimad Bhagavatam for our benefit. Nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamma shloke bhakti bhavati naistiki. By regular attendance at the Srimad Bhagavatam class and by rendering of service to the pure devotees, everything inauspicious within the heart is practically destroyed to nil, and loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental verses, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. So, verse number 8 is Sanskrit, Dvi Prarada Vasane Ya Pralayo Brahmanas tu te tavad adyasate lokam parasya parachintaka. Worshippers of the Hiranyagarbha expansion of the personality of Godhead remain within this material world until the end of two praradhas, when Lord Brahma also dies. And Srila Prabhupada has a purport. One dissolution is at the end of Brahma's day, and one is at the end of Brahma's life. Brahma dies at the end of two praradhas, at which time the entire material universe is dissolved. Persons who are worshippers of Hiranyagarbha, the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, do not directly approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead in Vaikuntha. They remain within this universe on Satyaloka or other higher planets until the end of the life of Brahma. Then, with Brahma, they are elevated to the spiritual kingdom. The words Parasya Parachintaka mean always thinking of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or being always Krishna conscious. When we speak of Krishna, this refers to the complete category of Vishnu Tattva. Krishna includes the three Purusha incarnations, namely Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, and Kshirodakshayi Vishnu, as well as all the incarnations taken together. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Brahmadi Murti Shukala Niyamena Tishtan Nanavataram Makarod Bhuvaneshu Kintu Krishna Svayam Samabhavat Paramapumanyo Govindamadi Purusham Tamahang Bhajami. I'm familiar with that verse because when I bathe and take care of my Shalagram Shila in the morning time, I chant verses from the Brahma Samhita when I'm bathing my Shalagram Shila. So then Prabhupada gives a summation here. Lord Krishna is perpetually situated with his many expansions, such as Rama, Nrsimha, Vamana, Madhusudan, Vishnu, and Narayan. And the actual translation of that verse is here in the Brahma Samhita, which I have with me. It says, the translation given here is, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna, and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nrsimha, Vamana, etc., as his subjective portions. And there's a small purport here by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj. His subjective portions as the avatars, namely Rama, etc., appear from Vaikuntha, and his own form, Krishna, manifests himself with Braj in this world from Goloka. The underlying sense is that Krishna Chaitanya, identical with Krishna himself, also brings about by his appearance the direct manifestation of Godhead himself. That's the purport that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj gives to this verse. Then Prabhupada goes on, he exists with all his plenary portions and the portions of his plenary portions, and each of them is as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words Parasya Parachintaka mean those who are fully Krishna conscious. Such persons enter directly into the kingdom of God, the Vaikuntha planets, or if they are worshippers of the plenary portion, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, then they remain within this universe until dissolution, and after that they enter. So this is the idea here. And so in this verse, they're speaking about the worshippers of Garbhodakshayi Vishnu. So some people, I don't know, I don't have so much experience, but maybe some of you have experience. Perhaps in India, some people are worshipping Garbhodakshayi Vishnu. Of course, we're learning from Srila Prabhupada to worship Krishna, but some people, they may be worshiping Lord Vishnu. Of course, other sampradayas, they may be worshiping Lakshmi Narayan, like that, Vaishnava sampradayas. So it appears from this verse and purport that some persons, they worship Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, and it appears from what's being explained here in this verse that they don't go directly back to the spiritual world, because, first of all, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, he's manifested from Krishna to manifest the material world. Now, as you recall, when Krishna wants the material world to be manifested, then it's kind of like there's a cloud or a shadow in the spiritual world, and then Krishna expands in further different expansions, Vasudeva, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and like that. And then he expands from there further as the Mahavishnu. And Mahavishnu is lying on the causal ocean. And then from when Krishna wants the material world to be manifested, then Mahavishnu, he breathes out. And then with his breathing out, then all of the universes come out of his body, in hair pores, the pores of his skin. So, and then each universe is manifested, and then he manifests himself further as the Garbhodakshayi Vishnu in each universe. And as you may recall, the universe at the beginning is empty. It's just a kind of like a sphere covered by different layers of earth, air, water, fire, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, each layer 10 times thicker than the previous one. So the material universe is then kind of empty. So when he expands into the universe, then he, seeing that the universe is empty, from his perspiration, he creates the Garbhodak ocean. And then he lies down on Sheshanaga, and Lakshmi is there serving his lotus feet. And then from his navel, a lotus sprouts. And then Lord Brahma takes birth on that lotus, and he's to be the engineer of the things within the universe. And then the Lord expands further, and he enters into the heart of every living entity who's in the material universe, and into the center of every atom, manifesting the atom. So then in that way he expands further and accompanies all of us. He accompanies all of us as Lord Paramatma in the heart, and he manifests every single atom. So this is a very good way of understanding how Krishna is all-pervading, or at least in the material world, Lord Vishnu is all-pervading. And, of course, Krishna, when a devotee is inclined towards Lord Krishna, then actually Lord Vishnu can leave the heart, and Krishna and Srimati Radharani can come into the heart. So the idea is that these, but the point being made here in the purport is that some of the persons, they're worshiping Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, and so they don't go back to the spiritual world until the end of the universe. So the idea is that those who are worshiping Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, they go to Brahmaloka, and this is explained in the next verses, that they actually merge into the body of Lord Brahma. And then when at the end of the universe, when Lord Brahma goes to the spiritual world, then they also go to the spiritual world at that time. And so this is the situation which is being explained here in this verse. And Prabhupada says here that the persons who are Krishna conscious, He says, such persons enter directly into the kingdom of God, the Vaikuntha planets, or if they are worshippers of the plenary portion, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, then they remain within this universe until dissolution, and after that, then they enter into the spiritual world. So then, different verses go on, and then Kapila Deva explains to his mother that you're already thinking of me as your son, so you should continue like that. So the idea is that contemplating and worshiping the form of Lord Krishna is a very nice devotional service. And so this is recommended by Kapila Deva to his mother later on in the verses. And so for us, for those of us who are taking part in the Krishna consciousness movement, we get information that if we worship Lord Krishna and become Krishna conscious and think of Krishna always. Of course, Krishna mentions this in the Bhagavad Gita. He says that the best thing for you to do is to always think of me and remember my activities. Then if you can't do that, then you should engage in the regulative principles of devotional service. And if you can't do that, then you should try to work for me, because by working for me, you'll be inspired. And then if you can't do that, best thing to do is to work in such a way that you give up the fruits of your activities. So in this way, Krishna covers the whole story of different persons and different abilities. But the idea is that we should be always thinking of Krishna. And Prabhupada says here, the words parasya parachintaka mean those who are fully Krishna conscious. And so the idea is that for those of us who are taking part in the Krishna consciousness movement, it's probably best for us to remember Lord Krishna. Now, if somebody's attracted to worshipping Lord Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, that's okay. He can do that too, but he doesn't go directly back to Krishna Loka. He doesn't go directly back to the spiritual world. He has to wait until the material manifestation is dissolved, and then he can enter into that. So we're being trained, we're being taught to worship Krishna, to remember Krishna, to always remember Krishna. Well, actually, the injunction is to always remember Krishna and to never forget Krishna. And it's also said that these two principles, they are the sum and substance of all the regulative principles that we follow. And so if you can remember Krishna, if you can remember, and if you cannot forget Krishna, then this is very nice. This is a very good way to. But some people, they may want to worship Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, so they can do that. And he's, of course, transcendental to the modes of material nature. He has nothing to do with the material nature, but you don't get back right away. Of course, for somebody who's absorbed in Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, he might not bother him. But anyway, that's the point, and that's the idea here that's being explained in this verse, that they don't go back immediately, they don't go back directly, they go to Brahmaloka, and then they merge with the Lord Brahma, and then they go back to the spiritual world when the material universe is destroyed or not manifest any longer, or just brought back into the body of Mahavishnu. Because when Mahavishnu breathes in, then all the universes come back into his body. All the living entities sort of go for a long sleep within the body of Mahavishnu, and then when he breathes out again, everything comes back out, and everybody gets, according to their desire, according to what they karma and what they were desiring previously, then their bodies become manifest again, and then they can carry on with their activities. But of course, the best thing is to always remember Krishna, not forget Krishna, and then you can, when this particular life is finished, if you and I try in that way to remember Krishna, then we take birth with in that particular universe where Krishna is manifesting his pastimes, and then we take part in Krishna's pastimes, and then we can go back to the spiritual world. We get trained up, so to say. And when the Krishna manifested 5,000 years ago, there were many devotees who were in this training period, and we see that some of the gopis, they were previously they were there during the time of Lord Ramachandra, and they desire, as you may recall, some of the sages in Naimisharanya, they were desiring to have a conjugal relationship with Lord Ramachandra, and he said, "No, can't do it now. I've only got one wife, but when I manifest again, as it took like 1,750,000 years from the time when Lord Ramachandra was present to the time when Krishna was present. So then he manifested again, and then those devotees became gopis, and then as you may recall, also the personified Vedas. Krishna offered a benediction to the personified Vedas, saying, "Well, what would you like?" And the personified Vedas said, "Okay, if you're offering that benediction, we'd like to become gopis." And Lord Krishna said, "Well, that's practically impossible, but, well, I'll do it." And so the Shruti-chara gopis, they were 5,000 years ago, they became manifested then. And so then there were, and those gopis, they got a chance to associate with eternal associate gopis, and then they became more and more fixed up in devotional service, and they manifested their service as gopis, and then they probably eventually went back to the spiritual world. So this is how things go on. So that's my understanding of what was going on in this particular verse, and I'll read the verse over once again. Worshippers of the Hiranyagarbha expansion of the personality of Godhead remain within this material world until the end of 2 Paradas, when Lord Brahma also dies. So, questions, comments, corrections, observations, realizations, anything that anyone would like to say? I spoke for some time, and now it's your chance to speak too.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hi, Mataji.
Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Very, very wonderful class as always. And Prabhuji, I thank to Lalitangi Mataji for reading the Prabhupada Leelamrita. Because of that, all your memories came out.
Well, like I said before, at that time in the movement, there were not so many devotees, so Srila Prabhupada could praise me at that time. But then in the course of the Krishna conscious movement, more and more devotees came, and they also acted without any of their own endeavors. And, of course, some devotees, they had certain agendas, but then some devotees became manifests and became members of the Krishna conscious movement, and they were more qualified than myself too. So that was early on in the movement. Anyway, that was an adventure. I was a young man, so I wanted to have an adventure. So young men like to go off and have an adventure, So I had an adventure going to London and then Germany, and then preaching Krishna conscious movement there. So that was an adventure. Krishna was very kind to me. He gave me an adventure to go off on, and so like that. And of course, Srila Prabhupada, he went off on a real adventure because he left Vrindavan and with his Srimad Bhagavatams, and he came to the West completely. And Srila Prabhupada was, he knew about Krishna consciousness. We didn't know anything about Krishna consciousness, but it was a great adventure for Srila Prabhupada. At the age of 70 years, we were all young guys at that time, so we were ready for adventures.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Anything
Thank
else
you very
anyone
much.
would like to say? Excuse me?
Just gratitude, Prabhu, for your, describing the history of ISKCON and also of the Europe. We, grew up after the Second World War, so we don't know much. I thought Germany was divided into 2 parts, but you said in 4 parts.
No,
it was very
parts,
interesting, and how you all went and started the Krishna consciousness in those 20 years is amazing, unimaginable. Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Also, when I was in Berlin, it's when Hansa Duda came to Germany to be the GBC, he actually asked me, okay, I think what you should do is you should go over to the communist section, and because what you could do, when you were in Berlin, you could go from West Berlin, which was the American section or the free section. You could go to East Berlin, and you could go and visit. And so Hansa Duda at that time said, okay, this is what you do. You go over there and visit, and you just walk around and chant Hare Krishna and see if somebody doesn't approach you. And there might be some people in the communist section who are interested in Krishna consciousness. So eventually we did that also, and then we got some sort of a following in the communist section. And there was actually a devotee who became initiated. His name was Eka, and so that was an adventure too, boy. Dealing with the communists, wow, that's not so easy. All glories to Niranjana Swami and all the devotees in Russia. The Russian people are, we see that there are so many Russian devotees. The Russian people are very God-fearing, conscious. And so now there's so many devotees in Russia, and so many Russian devotees travel all over the world. And so now we have all kinds of help from Russia. So these things, the whole thing changed, So it's very interesting.
Yes.
So anything anyone else would like to say?
So, Prabhuji, that's so amazing to hear that you went to the communist section of Berlin. So, we read in Prabhupada Lilamrita that the police was watching them, and we also read that book, that Salted Bread, how
oh yes,
the police would catch.
Yeah, I haven't read that book yet. I've got to get that book and read that. Yeah, actually I was just remembering this morning, I was talking to one of the devotees in the temple. Every single letter that I got from Srila Prabhupada while I was in Germany was opened. It arrived at the temple, open. They were actually reading my mail. This is not the communists, but this is the Germans. And I guess they didn't know, what we were going to do, what this was. So actually, they opened all of my mail from Srila Prabhupada to see what Srila Prabhupada was instructing, things like that. So these things go on, And the communists were, of course, they were completely atheistic, but there are amongst the Germans and amongst the Russians, there are persons who are interested in God, their God consciousness, and so now it's coming out, and Russia is developing like anything, and all glories to Niranjana Swami and others who are preaching there in Russia, and now I guess in China also things are going on. We'll see exactly what happens, how things develop. And of course now in India also, India is becoming really Krishna conscious. There's so many people are coming, and there's new temples opening, and the Krishna conscious movement is going like anything in India, from what I hear. And of course now with the Mayapur being developed and the temple of the Vedic planetarium, boy, it's just like, and you know, the new temple room in the temple room in the temple of the Vedic planetarium is going to be able to hold 10,000 devotees. I mean, really, that's huge, wonderful. So this is very nice. So what's going to happen in the Krishna consciousness movement? It's amazing, all the different things that are going on.
Prabhu, there is another temple coming up in Vrindavan, which is going to be the highest temple in the world. I don't know who's making it, but that's also on the plans in Vrindavan.
Yeah.
It's like a tower, huge tower.
Oh, big tower. Yes. Interesting.
I can ask a question, like, did you go into the communist section? Were you dressed like a devotee, or did you?
Yes, I was dressed in my dhoti.
Oh, Krishna.
And they didn't know what was going on. I just said that I was coming over to visit, see how things were going in there. And so they let me walk in the dhoti, and I was chanting on my beads, and I went to different places and visited. And eventually, what happened was somebody did approach me, and that particular person became a devotee. And then we started preaching in different places. First, we had to go to the park because we didn't have any place to go. So we were preaching in the park. And then eventually somebody lent us his apartment, and we were having Sunday programs in East Berlin. And it was tricky, you know. We had to be careful because they're communist persons are generally atheistic, against God. You know, the preachings of Lenin were that the religion is the opiate of the people. People, that's how they view it. And so they don't have a very good understanding of religion, and especially Krishna consciousness. They're viewing the religion to be the opiate of the people. So, it's difficult, and then you keep preaching, and eventually things start happening, and things develop. And people in general are different from the politicians. So just like we see here in America, politicians are one, and the people are different. So there are differences. So Srila Prabhupada, when he was in India, he was preaching to some of the politicians, and nothing happened. And so when he came to the West, he developed a sort of like grassroots development in a democracy, because the people choose their representatives. So he said, his approach was then educate the people, and then they'll pick Krishna conscious rulers. So nowadays we do have a congresswoman from Hawaii. Her name is Tulsi, and so now we have some devotees in Washington who are good fixed up devotees. So these things are going on. So the Krishna consciousness movement is developing.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. So, Prabhuji, one more question.
Sure.
When you first came to Hamburg, you didn't know German, right?
No, I didn't.
And you were alone with the other...
No, when I went to Hamburg, I wasn't alone, because Krishna Das and Uttama Shloka met me in Berlin. When I went to Berlin, I was alone.
So how did you do that, Prabhuji? Like first starting what you did when you were alone?
When I was alone, what I would do is I would go take a blanket, and I would sit down in a very busy place on the street. And I had a little begging bowl, 12 inches around or something like that, and I had cards. And I had cards in the begging bowl, and I would just sit and I would chant with kartals. And so then people were very curious, and then they would gather around. And then I would stop the kirtan, and I would find somebody in the audience who understood English, and then I spoke to the people through them, and then they would translate into German what I had to say. And so then in that way, I was able to collect some money, and I was able to go preaching. So that's how I did it when I was all by myself. And then when we got more devotees, then we would go on Harinam, and like that. So when I was by myself, I would just sit down in a busy place. In Berlin, there's a place called Gedenkniskirche. That's a church that was bombed out during the Second World War, and then they built another church, more modern church, next to it. So this was more like in the center of Berlin at that time, and so there were a lot of people around. So I would just sit and chant and wait for people to gather, and then I would speak to them. That's how I do it. When you're all by yourself, it's not, you're limited as to what you can do. So that's what I did.
So two more questions, Prabhuji. So when did you meet Prabhupada, and when did you get initiated, and when you went to Berlin? And the next question is where were you staying, and for food, and what were you doing in the initial days when you were alone?
Yes. In the initial days, well, first of all, first question, when I met Srila Prabhupada in Montreal. And that was when Srila Prabhupada came to Montreal in 69, 67, 68, somewhere around there. And, but I came in contact with the temple before that. And so the devotees asked me if I wanted to get initiated. And so I couldn't go back to the United States because I was a draft dodger. So I sent beads to Srila Prabhupada, and he chanted on them. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think I was the first devotee who got initiated by mail. And then Srila Prabhupada sent some beads for me to wear on my neck. And so that's how. And then when Srila Prabhupada came to Montreal, I think it was in 68, 69. Then I actually met Srila Prabhupada, and but I was initiated before by mail. But Srila Prabhupada gave me my second initiation in Montreal at that time by fire sacrifice. He gave me Gayatri mantra. And then when I was alone, when I was alone in Amsterdam, I would go and stay in what are called Jugendherberge. Jugendherberge is a youth hostel. In Europe, they have a system of what are called youth hostels, and young people, they can go and travel to a particular place and stay in the youth hostel, and then they have to be out by 10 o'clock in the morning, and then they can come back again in the evening. And so that's where I would stay. I would stay in youth hostels. And when I went to Berlin by myself, I went to the youth hostel at Glückstrasse, and I told them, I'm coming here to Berlin to open a temple. Can I stay here in your youth hostel until I actually get a temple, a place where I can live? And they said, okay. And so I stayed there until there was, sometimes youth hostels have big influxes of people, so then I stayed somewhere else. I stayed in different places, and Krishna took care of me. What had happened is that, before I was a young man, so when I was back in the United States, I used to like to go hitchhiking. And when I went to college, I went to college away from where my home was, and I would hitchhike. In those days, hitchhiking, you go to the side of the road and you stick out your thumb like this, and somebody wants to give you a ride, they stop, and they give you a ride. So this was a way of going for an adventure, as I mentioned before, young men like to go for adventures. So I would hitchhike from college and back and forth. And so then when I came to Europe, then I would also, before I was a devotee, I would hitchhike, and then I would get rides with different people, and they would give me rides. And then I would stay in places. And but when I was a devotee, then I would stay in the youth hostels and buy my food and offer it and take it and like that. So it was somewhat limited, but for young guy, this is kind of like an adventure, and that's what it was. It's a spiritual adventure. Is that all right?
What it means. And one more question, Prabhuji.
Sure.
So you said you were second initiated when you were 60 in 69, and when did you travel to Europe for preaching?
Well, that took place when Srila Prabhupada was in Montreal, and I approached him because I knew that he wanted to open a temple in London, and that was the time when Srila Prabhupada said, "Oh, you stay here." But I was a little frustrated because I was used to traveling, and so then I approached him again, and Prabhupada said, "Okay, you can go." But Srila Prabhupada knew that I was not very expert in dealing with the material world, and he told me, he said, when I came to America, I was a Calcutta boy, so I never got cheated. So Prabhupada he knew how to deal with the material world. I wasn't so expert in dealing with the material world. So, but anyway, he warned me like that. So then from Montreal, actually what happened was that my mother gave me some money, and she with a certain agreement, and the agreement was that I'm going to give you enough money so that you can go and open the temple in London, and with the idea that after everything is going on, then you go back to college. And
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, I'm so sorry. There's so much nectarian simultaneously.
Hare Krishna.
Fans too.
Mute phone, please.
Please.
Excuse me?
Yeah, sorry for the interruption, Prabhuji. I was just trying to get rid of the noise of scrapping of pans so that I can hear you clearly.
Okay, so you can ask any further questions you want.
Yeah, so you were telling that your mother gave you the money so that you would go open the temple and then come back to college. So would you like?
And then go back to college. That was the agreement. So I asked Srila Prabhupada, well, if I go back to college, what should I study? Prabhupada said, oh, you should English. So I said, okay. But I never went back to college. So anyway, that was it. But my college career started after high school, and I was very much interested in studying forestry. So I went to a small forestry college up in northern New York State. And then from there I transferred out to the University of Oregon, and then at the University of Oregon, that's when I was actually drafted out of college, which wasn't supposed to happen. But from what somebody told me, he said, I heard that General Hershey, who was in charge of the draft, and this is during the time of the draft in the war in Vietnam, he said to me, I heard that General Hershey made a proclamation that anyone caught demonstrating at a draft board should immediately be drafted. So when I was in college at University of Oregon, I was kind of like, I wasn't politically oriented at all. But that was, at that time, there was a lot of political agitation about the war in Vietnam. And so young people, they would go demonstrate about, so I wasn't so much interested in that. But then one of my friends said, hey, listen, we're going to go down and demonstrate at the draft board. Why don't you come with us? And so I said, all right. So I went and demonstrated at the draft board, and the police came, and they took everybody's information. And so then actually I was drafted out of college, which wasn't supposed to happen. but and the person told me that General Hershey had done this, and I said, no, not. I said, I'm not very much into conspiracy theory, but then I actually called up a professor of contemporary American history at University of UNCG when I was here, and I said, this is the story, and he said, yes, actually, as far as we know, General Hershey did make that arrangement that anyone caught demonstrating at a draft board should immediately be drafted. And so that's what happened to me. And when I was drafted, then I decided, no, I'm not going in the Army. So I left the country as a draft dodger, and I went to Canada, and then I went across to Montreal, and then I went to Europe. This is before I was a devote.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I don't know what somebody's doing in the background there. They're making a lot of noise.
Yes.
Yeah, can the be muted, please? So, Prabhuji, one last question.
Okay, go ahead. Try.
Yeah. So, when you... I'm
Did
sorry.
you forget your question?
Yeah.
Okay. We can ask it another time.
Yeah, I got it. So, Prabhuji, you were telling some time back that you were going to write a book, and so is there any help needed for that? How is it going?
Well, yeah, what I need to do, I've got the story together. My wife is also an editor. I need to sit down and I need to write also about the letters which I got from Srila Prabhupada, an explanation of different letters. And I'm very busy here in Prabhupada Village, so I just haven't gotten the time to sit down and work on that. But it's some of the things are gotten together in that. So yeah, well, I was, like Brahmananda, Satyaraj wrote Brahmananda's book, and I was thinking that maybe Yogeshwara Prabhu, he's such a good author and such a good writer, maybe he could help me, but I don't know. He's very busy also, so anyway, we'll see. Yeah, eventually there will be a book out about my experiences with Srila Prabhupada, because they're. But I've spoken many stories and told many stories, and one time in Mayapur in 2005 there was a Prabhupada remembrance revival. I spoke there, and it was been recorded, and so the information is there, but we need to put it together in the form of a book. Yeah. Yeah,
thank you so much, Prabhuji. Like squirrels helping in the bridge of Hanuman, if we can do something to that, we'd be very happy to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I just have to get the time to sit down and do that.
So I know that even I was fortunate to taste the chapatis that you do. You do around 70 to 80 chapatis all alone during Sunday feast in Prabhupada village. Is that?
Yeah. Well, sometimes I can make, but sometimes they're not interested in having chapatis, so I don't always make chapatis. But I'm learning and getting chapatis down. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much, Prabhuji. If anybody has any other questions.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I am also very fortunate to have your chapatis. It's really, really amazing that you learn how to make chapatis from Srila Prabhupada and you are still making it. So it's doing service for...
I'm working on it, getting it together.
Yeah, so...
I don't always get the dough right, but I'm learning. Yeah.
But it's like doing a service of Srila Prabhupada with same enthusiasm from years and years and years. Like, you are doing the same thing over and over again. Every Sunday, if you cook chapatis and
it's not every Sunday, because Pankaj Janaba, who's the head cook, he doesn't always like to have chapatis for the Sunday feast. So some Sundays.
Yeah.
But I make chapatis also for our Tuesday night Bhagavad Gita class too. So that gives me a chance to practice.
Yeah, we are very fortunate to have you here, Prabhuji, in Prabhupada village and on the conference. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm very fortunate to have so much nice association too. So let me end here, and I'll say Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhayavacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Thank you very much for having an opportunity